Hey there, it's AZ. Welcome back to episode 67 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. Before I introduce my fabulous guest for today, I have a couple of items for you all and just a little life update. So first things first, call to action. If you are a health and wellness professional who wants to work in fire, it is daunting to try to create a career out of thin air. It is very, very difficult to reach fire departments, engage with them, offer your services, get a contract. All of those things are difficult, and I can help. So if you are one of those professionals, get on the wait list for my course, Building Your Career in Fire. I'll put the link in the show notes. I will also put the link in my Instagram bio. And I do not know when that course will be next offered, but if you are one of those people, you'll want to be on the wait list. So that's number one. Number two, I have a little giveaway today. And in order to be registered for the giveaway, there's a couple parts to it. What I would love for you to do is hop on whatever podcast platform you listen and leave me a review. Now, if you've already left me a review, you're still eligible, but either a previous review or a new review, what I need you to do then is send me an email, info@firerescuewellness.org. Let me know that you left a review and I will put you in the raffle. This is time sensitive. It needs to be done by August 15th, 2023. So leave a review, tell me you left me a review, and then I will raffle off a prize package on the 15th of August. So that's number one and number two. Number three, I'm recording this exactly 8 weeks past my knee surgery. And so things continue to get a little bit better day by day. I'm gaining range of motion. I'm gaining ability. I'm doing really, really well. And then I suffer a little setback. Like today, my quad is just killing me. It's ridiculous. But then probably tomorrow I'll wake up, everything will be great. I'll make more progress and then suffer a little setback. So all in all, super happy with my decision to have a total knee replacement. And yes, it is a slow process getting back. So as I mentioned, this is episode 67, and today I sat down with Rob Hartman, who is a certified strength and conditioning specialist since 2004. He has a very wide and diverse experience in the strength and conditioning field. He was with the Thor 3 initiative. He was with First Special Forces Group. He was actually the director of tactical and elite sport for BridgeAthletic. Then he went back for United States Air Force Special Warfare Human Performance Support Group, and then recently went back to BridgeAthletic to be the director of tactical and education. Rob is also an avid educator in the tactical setting, having supported efforts by the NSCA and EXOS, presenting nationally and internationally. He's also the co-author of the book Preparing for the Army Combat Fitness Test, which is published by Human Kinetics. His co-author on that was Nate Palin, a previous podcast guest. Rob and I had a great conversation about strength and conditioning, collecting data, what to do with the data, and then, of course, we talked about dogs, guacamole, and pico. I know you're going to love this episode today. And again, leave me a review. Let me know you left me a review and get entered into the drawing. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey listeners, it's AZ, and I am back for another episode of the podcast. And today I am joined by my friend, Rob Hartman. Rob, say hello to the listeners.
Hello, listeners.
Oh God, that was so lackluster.
What do you want me to say?
All right, that was like Scott Forbes level boring.
Well, I need more dew.
Right, do the dew, and I'm very surprised you don't have one. And that's Diet Dew for anyone that's getting judgy on us. We both drink Diet Dew. Okay. Rob, I'm going to hop right into the get to know you questions because I have a lot of other really intriguing things I want to talk to you about. So let's just start with, who is Rob Hartman?
Man, this is like that stuck point when you get in the interview and you're not quite sure what to say here, but I'll say I am a dad, a husband, a son, and a strength and conditioning professional for many years, and generally just someone who likes to solve problems and help people.
And you forgot two really important things, so I'm going to help you out here.
Okay.
You are a dog owner,
Yes.
and you make kick-ass guac and salsa.
I do a fair bit of cooking. Yes, absolutely. And the dogs actually had to go shut the door because we would have been interrupted once they heard me start talking. So yeah, you're right.
All right. Well, Rob, what sets your soul on fire?
Shoot. I'm not sure.
People. Rob requested that I send him questions in advance so that he could prepare.
And I did.
And he does not know what set his soul on fire.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not.
I'll make something up.
It's fire season. We've had a lot of rain this year, so we're all good. There's no fires in this soul.
All right, that's good enough.
Okay.
And then finally, how are you, or what are you doing to change the world?
Man, the only way that I'm trying to change the world is helping the people around me, family, friends, people I train, so on and so forth. Just those closest to me, I want to make a difference, and I know that they'll make a bigger difference, kind of that trickle down or trickle up effect.
The force multiplier.
I
love it. I love it. Well, listeners, I brought Rob on here for two specific reasons, three if you count our mutual love of Diet Do. But the two things that I really want to talk to Rob about today are, he is someone that I see as a subject matter expert in what we term conditioning. Now, Rob and I are both strength and conditioning coaches, but if you got 100 of us in a room, I would say 99 of us are leaning more towards the strength part of it. And then there's Rob, who is like the conditioning guru. So first of all, Rob, what in the hell even does conditioning mean?
Man, well, it's all encompassing, but I would say is when we start getting down to it, we want to not just use the word conditioning, although that's what I use because we've all grown up on it. You know, there's energy systems training, energy system development, which does allow it to get a little bit more specific to those anaerobic and aerobic components. And then there's even subcomponents under that. So typically what we're talking about when conditioning is just the ability to perform work at certain intensities for certain durations.
That just made it really simple. We can probably just hang up now and make this a 4-minute podcast, but there's more to talk about. So Rob currently is in a position with, can I say who you work for, Rob? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Rob works for BridgeAthletic, which is the best way I can explain it is a exercise program development and delivery platform that coaches use to interface with their athletes. But before that, Rob actually worked in the military. And if I understand correctly, it's a big pendulum that keeps swinging back and forth. So long time ago, the military was really into this whole conditioning aspect of it. And then did this pendulum swing way towards the strength part of it? And is it coming back to the center now? Tell us your experiences with working with the military.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's going to be a fun one. So first, just a little insight onto my career path that you did mention, that is I was in college athletics for 10 years prior to joining what was called the Thor 3 program back in the day when it first started in 2010. And I spent 6 years at First Group up there. I spent 4 years at SOAR, Special Operations Aviation Regiment, 4th Battalion specifically, 2 years at Bridge. Then most recently, I was at Air Force Special Warfare Training Wing, and now back at Bridge. So a lot of experience in the tactical space on a whole bunch of different levels. And yeah, moving from college athletics into the military setting was probably, again, those were visionaries that did not include us that were hired initially, was probably the best thing that could have happened, because we brought a strength and power focused practice, because that's essentially what team sport is in the majority of college athletics, pro sports, so on and so forth. We brought that strategy, those tendencies in, and imparted them on the people that we worked with. And that's where they were deficient. So huge win. And we saw it. We saw increases in strength. We saw funny enough, we didn't see a reduction in injuries. We actually saw an uptick, but that's because we created relationships where people were willing to go get seen prior to something catastrophic happening. In conjunction with that, 2 years down the road, we start to see a decline in the catastrophic injuries taking place. So definitely some key advantages of incorporating strength, or at least finding a balance in your practice. And then there was kind of like an aha moment where, and again, so I'm into data. It doesn't own me. It doesn't, but I definitely use it as a great assistant when programming and gaining, understanding and perspective of who I'm working with. And there was one point in time where noticed that we actually saw a decline in general of their aerobic capability. Now, people ask you like, hey, how much should I squat, or how much should I bench, or what should my 2 mile be? And it's like, what should my ratio be? Ratio is a little more debatable, but what should they be? It's like, I don't know. I guess whatever they are, because you already wear that beret. They already are, because you're already in that position. We need to find what your population as a whole is averaging, so we can have more of a homogeneous population, that the tasks or the capabilities are known amongst everybody, at least to a minimum standard. And so when we saw that decrease from what they were, we're like, man, we need to target this a little more specifically. We're having an impact where we were needed, but we don't want to have an impact where we weren't needed, especially as in a negative way. So it's really cool. And I'm sure the majority of strength and conditioning coaches can relate with me when you're in the room and you're watching people lift and you prescribe a certain percentage for a certain number of reps, and you can watch the entire room, look down the row and see everyone doing it. And there's going to be someone who sticks out. Like, that's not how that 82% is supposed to look for 5 reps. Let me walk over there and have a conversation. Because that's just where we've lived, is really in the weight room part of it. And so we wanted to get more targeted in our conditioning approach, so that we could provide prescriptive conditioning to target those abilities, both in terms of intensities and volumes, to be more specific, so that we could have that coach's eye in conditioning activities. We could balance it out and ensure that we wouldn't see a decrease in that characteristic while still bringing up the other characteristics. So that's why we got to where we were. So we saw that we had a change of the population, and then that's why we incorporated more conditioning. I would still say that there's a tendency for maybe, I don't know if it's a majority, but a good amount of people to bias strength and strength practices. And I think that's fine. But we do see that the tactical industry as a whole is focusing more on conditioning. Now, over focusing, I don't think so. When you say the pendulum swings back and forth, what I think was the pendulum totally swung one way for the military in terms of run, ruck, and all the injuries happened. Then we put in these place kind of tendencies or biases of strength and power. But now the coaches are seeing the same things that I said that we saw. They're seeing that they need to focus more on conditioning and being more strategic with that. So the conversations are probably in an uptick, but I wouldn't say that there's an over response to what's being prescribed by the professionals out there. I think that's pretty important to notice or to point out. So yeah, conversations, probably the pendulum has swung so that we're having a lot more of them. But I would say the practices have not swung so far to go back to where we were. I think we're in a good spot, and definitely the trajectory is very, very well suited for, I guess what we would use those critical words of optimal within the tactical setting.
That was an Really, really well explained answer. I would give you an A+ for that for sure, Rob. But I'm going to be a little bit stingy now. And I know that fire is not your niche of expertise. However, when I tell you that firefighters primarily suffer career ending, either line of duty deaths or they don't come back from cardiac events due to complications from cardiovascular disease. And if I tell you that the majority of the fire service is very representative of the general population, which is around 70% overweight, how do we take this information about conditioning and maybe apply it elegantly to the fire service? Do you have some insight on that?
No, that's great. And you're right. Definitely two different parties that fall under that tactical umbrella. And that's part of the reason why, we became friends. And there's a number of other experts in this field that I've become friends with, is because it's intriguing to me understanding all of the populations under that tactical umbrella and how they differentiate from one another. Really helps going from like a ground force to an aviation to a schoolhouse, then talking to police, fire, so on and so forth. So yeah, totally see that there's a difference in the population. And in terms of the precision conditioning and how that could be imparted in the fire service I think it's just another way to find something that resonates with the individual that would encourage them to partake more often. I don't think that this level of precision that we're kind of talking about, maybe why you brought me on here, is necessary, but it is fun. It is prescriptive. It's precise, but it's not necessary. What's necessary is consistency. So if there is something that encourages them to be consistent but is not prescriptive, do that, because volume is going to be the biggest thing, especially when it comes to cardiovascular health and benefit. But if you're that person who loves numbers, maybe you love heart rates, maybe you love paces, maybe you love new achievements, then that's definitely when we want to put in place this. And I would say if you do it as a professional in the fire service, give these to your people, you'll find that some people are really, really motivated by it. Some people are more motivated by it when they're in groups than just by themselves. But if they're not motivated by it, it doesn't necessarily detract. So it's kind of a net positive no matter how you look at it when you implement it. But again, it's not necessarily something you have to have. I remember sitting down with a bunch of coaches who came to visit me when I was at SOAR to talk about conditioning, because they listened to that 2017 maybe NSCA presentation that I gave, and they wanted to dive deeper in there. And then they were telling me what they were doing. And the question that I gave them was, are the people that you're working with getting better? And they're like, well, yeah. And I was like, then you're doing what's right. Like if we need to get more precise, or there's certain objectives, or you want to do this for your own intellectual stimulation, but where the people you are working with are at, we don't need to be this precise. So to me, to you, is you're doing a great job. Keep doing it. Don't worry if you're not doing what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. Like, we're both winning here. So a lot of ways.
And this brings up another question, sort of a bit of off topic, I'll say, but a lot of my population talks a lot about motivation. I don't hear much of I'm not disciplined to do something. I always hear I'm not motivated to do something. The Hartman dogs have entered the chat. And then they stopped.
No, I put it on mute so we couldn't hear it. Yeah, so I was waiting for a delivery. I got a new piece of equipment for the garage gym, and it was going to be delivered today. That's probably it.
Okay, so I will, because I was so rudely interrupted by the very cute dogs, I will rephrase the question. I hear a lot of I'm not motivated to do this. I don't hear a lot of people saying I'm not disciplined to do this. So motivation seems to be a really key factor in the fire service, somehow getting them motivated. And so do you have any insight on any ways that we could maybe get people motivated? Any ideas?
I'll give you I'll give you a few actually.
Yes, sir.
The one that I think is the most important is hiring a professional. And I'm telling you, hiring a professional to be there at the fire station with your people, because we can give them all the information that we need and we can give them the apps that ding and do all this stuff. But there is something, to my knowledge, that is unmeasurable to my knowledge, the advantage of having a person embedded in your fire station that cares. And so I'm quite literally doing 2 different presentations for the NSCA Tactical coming up in a little bit. And yeah, one of the things that when I go into all the quantification of all the things we can do, I can't quantify the relationships and the trust that we've created. You know, a lot of the conversations we had are very deep and very surprising that they have those feelings and think that we provide the level of support that we do. And I'm not going to get into those detail because I don't want to devalue any of them because they're very sincere. But yeah, above and beyond just the physicality that we're speaking to here, having that person who cares is motivating. Care motivates the practitioner and, you know, in this case, the people in the fire station. So definitely number one is get yourself a professional who's a right fit, and that will go a long way. 2, this is my understanding of the fire service and some of the wellness that they do, and I love numbers, as you know, is, man, if we do impart these prescriptive conditioning, which could just simply be tracking volume, how many steps a day today versus how many steps you cover in the next 2 months as your intervention, that works. Just track the pre, post, and the path along the way and compare those to the blood work that you have to do every single year. I mean, I love this stuff. You know that. This is me. I get my blood work somewhat regularly, and I see like, oh, hey, I up my vitamin D by this much. Man, look at that change. I up my exercise by this much. Oh man, look at my HDL. That changed there. Ooh, B12 is, I can put that up. Let's try that. So yeah, I do a lot of blood work because it's entertaining to me. But when you have, the fire service who does it on the regular basis, that's something you could do. Track the interventions and how they influence those, because those those measures that you guys track are health measures, and those are the ones I think you're focusing on in terms of longevity and overall health. So those are the 2 main ways that I see as low-hanging fruit, or hire someone to be embedded and then take advantage of those, what we'll call pre-post tested, as your blood work.
And I really agree with you, especially, well, on both of them. But the first one is my biggest recommendation to departments. But on the second one, well, I guess they're both related, because you and I and the friends that we hang out with, we are a different breed. Like you and I and Johanna and Ryan and name them, we enjoy movement. We enjoy training, but the general population doesn't. And so if they're going to invest the time and energy in this stupid training that they don't even want to do, then they want to make sure that it's working. And by having those metrics that we can measure, whether it's, like you said, tracking blood work or tracking heart rate, creeping down over time, or waist measurement, whatever it is, having metrics to track, I think is great to show people, hey, it's working. It's working.
Yeah, I totally, here's a fun one. And so in my previous unit, I worked with Jason and Jake, 2 great guys that are the coaches there dominating. And Jason talked me into running a half marathon with them. I wouldn't say with him, but during the same day. He's obviously a lot faster than I am. But I hadn't done much, and that's my fault. My lack of, I guess you would say, motivation. I hadn't done too much conditioning leading into that. So I was like, actually, that's a good motivator. There's another thing, motivator, find events and things that are target dates that get you going. And so I did it. And I wear the Oura ring, and I have for a long time, and I track that. And it was really funny because Jake called me out about halfway through the build up to that. Man, HRV's really climbing, that heart rate's really dropping. Yeah, I know, Jake. And then after the fact, after I did it, I didn't run for 2 months. I still worked out, hit the weight room, did some sleds and some events here and there, but I did not do near the volume. And Jake goes, "Hey, looks like your resting heart rate's coming back up." Son of a gun. So there's another way, find a peer to hold you accountable to what you're doing. But yeah, track.
Is this the same Jake that asked in the question box, why is Rob Hartman so mean? Is that the same Jake or a different Jake?
No, that's Jacob. He would not like it if you called him Jake. The Jake I'm talking about, I call Crusty Duck.
Crusty Duck. All right.
Story for another time.
Yes. See you at Tactical. Okay. So one of the presentations, because you have two, but one of the presentations that you're talking about is directly about conditioning. And I am actually looking at your objectives right here. And it's to be able to prescribe prescriptive conditioning programs based off of individual physiology and performance metrics. Now, we've already agreed that the majority of the fire service probably isn't going to need to get this nitty gritty. But I also think that there's a lot of listeners that are probably interested in what that actually means. So can you give us the 30,000 foot wave top view of what that actually means?
Yeah, I'll definitely stick to the 30,000 foot view because I actually, as you know, I've spoken on this before at Tactical, so I was more of a support element for this. Jason Ralia will be the lead presenter when it comes to the nitty gritty. So I will stay at the 30,000 for the presentation. I'll stay for the 30,000 here. And
perfect.
What we're talking about there is the ability to use both performance metrics, so speeds on treadmills, times in different distance runs, and using those to find a prescriptive way to give you something individual to you. Because if you run an 8-minute mile and the person next to you runs a 6.5-minute mile, you're not going to get the same benefits if you give them the same prescription. So that's one, is the performance. Now, what might be even better suited for the fire department, which is another portion here, the physiology portion of it. And I don't know all fire departments, obviously, but I know Denver South Metro has the VO2 cart that they do on a regular basis. So what you could do there, and what Jason will speak about in this tactical presentation, is the crossover point. The crossover point where the body begins to utilize carbohydrates over fat. And the further to the right that is, suggests that you have a better flexibility, better metabolic health than if it was all the way to the left. And we've seen people, not the operators that we've worked with, but we've seen people have crossover points very, very low, even lower than what the, I guess, standard that you see for like a zone 2. So zone 2 is kind of right around that point, is 60 to 70 beats per minute is the average that you see on a lot of the treadmills and the machines and the pullers go-to type of ranges. We've seen people way lower than that, down to like 40%. And that suggests that we need to get a little more just work, just volume, just get as much as you can in so that we can start to push that to the right. So if you did it like Denver South Metro does theirs, if they did it and identified the crossover point, saw where that was, if it was at a good point, then they could say, hey, you're doing fine, whatever you're doing, keep doing, you're healthy, your blood work is good, your crossover point is here, man, you're winning. If it's not, then we can have some discussions like, you're really fit, your body comp's low, but that crossover point happens real early. It's like, well, I only do high intensity activity. It's like, okay, that's fun. It is, but we might be able to encourage some more metabolic flexibility or some more health if we introduce some more longer, slow duration type activities. Or the person who does not look as fit and has that same, like, we needed to do some activity just in general. So yeah, there's there's two different things that he'll dive into. Those are two overarching 30-foot views, but he's going to get into the nitty gritty and give you the numbers and ins and outs. So I won't steal his thunder. I'll let that be for NSCA Tactical.
Here's your little plug. You probably should attend Tactical if you're interested in this topic, but NSCA, you're welcome. But I had two thoughts while you were speaking. The first one is, most firefighters are not going to be able to do this for themselves. So it goes back to the coaching. The second one was, Rob talked about South Metro, which is an amazing fire department. And I'm trying to get some of their staff on the podcast to talk about all the human performance things that they do. But yes, they have a metabolic cart, and yes, they can highly accurately measure these things. But don't forget, we have, we can do a protocol on the treadmill at the fire department to get an estimation. It's not great, but it's an estimation. And as long as you're comparing apples to apples, you're going to see trends over time. So don't think just because you don't work at South Metro, you can't do any of this stuff, because you can. Sometimes we just got to make it work.
100%.
All right. You said zone 2 cardio, and I hear people talking about zone 2 cardio all the time. And it's, if I heard you correctly, it's just that 60 to 70% of, is it predicted maximum, is what they call zone 2 cardio?
Well, kind of. It gets into the nitty gritty. So if we're looking at general consumer products, then yes, that'll be the 60 to 70% of your estimated max heart rate. Now, one, physiology is varying, so don't get caught in the weeds. Kind of like if you're doing this and you're accumulating so much time in it, you're winning. Just because you're not like on the dot perfect with the prescription doesn't mean you're not getting a benefit. We often get caught up to like, well, if I can't do it perfect, I'm not going to do it. Don't do that. Anything is better than nothing, guaranteed. So before I get in a little bit to the weeds here, if you're exercising at a pace where you can sustain full sentence conversations and not have to pause and gasp for air, but it's still a little bit of a struggle, you're most likely in the zone 2 where you need to be. So you can do that field test. I think I'm not an ACE member or certified person, but I think ACE has a good talk test descriptor where you can say like ventilatory threshold 1, ventilatory threshold 2, talk test, and they'll tell you exactly what your zone 2 is based on talk test.
Interesting.
So I don't know, maybe a link to that in the show notes.
Oh, writing it down right now.
But really, if you look at the literature and even the experiences that we've had testing it, it can be anywhere from 60 to 85% of your estimated max. Again, because I said that crossover point, we can see some people are lower, some people are higher. Well, zone 2 is really related to that crossover point. So those people who have it pushed to the right very far because they're definitely utilizing fat for a long time, used to a lot of work, there's going to be closer to that 80+% mark. Whereas someone who's inactive, it may be 60. But again, do that talk test, do that field test. You don't need anything fancy for that. And the cool thing is that intensity or that speed associated with it will change with you. So if you're right now walking at however many steps per minute, and that's your threshold where I have to take a gasp of breath in between this sentence. It's like, okay, maybe it's a little high. All of a sudden you're running, and that's where you can maintain that pace. Like, it changes with you. So that talk test is really a good example of how to manage your zone 2 without fancy metabolic carts and professionals.
And any poor sucker friend that's been on the receiving end of a phone call from me lately has been experiencing a lot more of that gasping while I'm walking because I'm deconditioned. I had surgery at the beginning of June, so everything is much more difficult. Perfect example. All right. I want to talk to you about data too, because I know that this is your jam. And I'm going to put the golf ball on the tee for you to take a swing at it. Here's the problem that we have in the fire service. We collect a lot of data about a lot of things. EMS calls, demographics, fires, we collect data, but for the most part, we don't do shit with it. And for the most part, that does include fitness testing data. So talk to me about what's worth collecting, what's worth curating and acting on, and just give me, dig into the weeds on this, because the fire service needs to hear it.
Yeah, it's funny because we don't really have to get into the weeds, which is kind of disappointing to all of us because we love the weeds for this stuff. But that's even one of the things that I'll talk about in our data presentation is right now, and the GAO report for POTUF pointed out, is like, we're not even tracking utilization in a usable way. And there's no, if you're not using a program, you absolutely cannot justify the program. So we need to track, you need to define what it is and then track utilization at the bare minimum. I've seen some interesting stuff when I went to the H2F summit presented by Andrew Thompson on what different units with embedded H2F staff members are experiencing psychologically, which is crazy, versus non-embedded. And all that was, it wasn't like how many sets of squats did they do, how many visits to the physical therapist. No, it was just having someone there. So they just tracked, did they have staff available? And they were seeing benefits in the surveys associated with mental health. Man, that's cool. Just having people versus not having people showed an influence in this. Imagine if we started to go a little bit deeper. So step 2, not just do we have people, are those people being used? Now, how does that further enhance those reports, or does it? Because if it doesn't, then, maybe we had enough by just having people there. If utilization starts to influence, like, how do we encourage more utilization, more staff? So there's some tricky stuff there. It's kind of low hanging fruit. We don't even need to do the metabolic carts and get the nitty gritty. That's how you bring additional value to the end user, not necessarily to the organization. And you can see in my preceding dialogue to our podcast here, I have a lot of focus on the end user because I'm a practitioner in the field, or at least I was. And my focus is getting those professionals everything I can get them with the time I'm there. The biggest return on investment, because the more value they see, the more they're going to hang out with me. The better they're going to be, the better relationships we're going to create. But as an organization, I think tracking utilization and staff members is a definitely good start. Now, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm again, military is not my wheelhouse, but I know at least in the fire service and to some extent in the police agencies, there's a lot of fear of anything tracked, meaning there's a lot of fear of tracking utilization, because what is going to be the consequence when they find out I'm not utilizing it? So is it the same in the military or not?
No, it's the military. They'll track everything they want to track, and that's just what it is. And that was one thing I was going to talk is understanding that there's unions and everything else associated with fire service. That's a tricky one. And I think I was just thinking this because I knew you were going to ask this, is sitting here in our conversation where half the brain's doing one thing and half's doing the other. I was like, maybe that's why it might be necessary to hire a third party to where the fire service and the union reps can agree upon what level of depth can be reported to the fire service. So it's not put onto an individual, but there's still value shown so that you can get better support. So maybe, working with a third party to work with that fire department embedded, tracking certain metrics, but only allowed to report, I guess, not really publicly, but to the service and union alike, a certain degree. I think that could pay big dividends. And then the fire service members themselves get all that nitty gritty stuff that we're talking about. Maybe that VO2 metabolic test, maybe the blood work and the interventions there. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it was a thought that I just had that I wanted to share.
No, that definitely relates to it. And I think we just have to get past, there's problems on both sides. There's the actual firefighters, the line firefighters, who sometimes, I'm going to be honest, we have on our tinfoil hats and we think everything's a conspiracy. And then we also have to look at it from the other direction. As the administration, of course, we want return on investment for what we're spending our money on. But at the end of the day, what we really want is to take care of our people, or what we should want is to take care of our people. And so if us wearing the tinfoil hats really truly felt like the administration was truly trying to take care of us, I think that's where the magic is. Shameless plug for My Talk It Tactical, measuring return on investment in novel ways.
There you go.
Okay. I want to be very respectful of your time, and I know that I have a couple more side topics to talk about. But first, is there something that I should have asked you, or maybe a rabbit hole we should have crawled down that we didn't crawl down? You know, is there something that we missed? Tell me more.
I don't think so. I think that we hit some of the big rocks. You know, where does conditioning fit? The balance between strength and conditioning, which we need both. Getting return on investment, what to track, maybe as an individual, as an organization. No, I can't really see anything right now. Say I'm bad at this too. Is more you give me a problem and we'll work to a solution. You know, what problems did we talk about? I mean, if you're not mentioning them, I'm good.
I see now why you wanted a list. Your brain works different than mine. All right. So we already talked a little bit about the dogs. We got a guest appearance from the dogs, but tell me about the dogs.
Oh, yeah. We've got a German Shepherd who is 9 now. Yep. Her name's Roku, not like the TV thing, which I didn't think about at the time, but she was named that by the breeder, who was a friend. And actually, I didn't want another dog because we just got our Border Collie Lab mix the year before. But whatever, talked us into it. And they're like, what's Roku? Like, oh, that's Japanese, I think, for the number 6. She was the 6th born. I was like, well, that's a good story. I guess we'll keep it. So there's that one. The other one is a Border Collie Lab mix. We got 10 or a little over 10 years ago. And I'll tell you, the German Shepherd is a family dog, like the perfect dog. Sits there in the living room, follows you everywhere you go. Not too bad. Definitely barks at anyone who comes to the front door, as you heard.
Yes, observed.
Yeah. And then the Border Collie Lab mix is like what I call a people dog. You can like look at him and you're like, that dog can see into my soul. Like he understands everything. And that dog, even when he was a puppy, outdid me. I was like, man, dog, I don't know what else to teach you. Like I only have so much knowledge on how to train dogs. And so everything that I taught him, from sit, down, roll over, speak, shake, blah, blah, blah. I taught him the hand gestures for those. And then he learned that too quick. I was like, yep, Border Collies, you can see the Border Collie shining through it. That's a unique breed, and they have more intelligence than I'm prepared to utilize. But yeah, two great dogs. The kids ask me, why do they follow you everywhere? So we're close. I'm a big fan of my dogs, and it's been a fun 9 years with them.
Well, and they follow you because you feed them. Also, as you were talking about the story of Roku, I wonder if it's very much like going to a shady tattoo parlor where you ask them to write symbols in a foreign language and you come out saying, like, I have a bird butt instead of like big strong.
Yeah, I never Googled it because I don't want to know.
Yeah. I'm going to Google it before the show notes.
I bet.
All right. Last really important topic. What is the magic element to the Rob Hartman salsa?
Man, fresh produce.
That's it? Just fresh? That's it?
I'll tell you, the two things that I'm heavy on, salt and lime juice.
Oh,
yeah. You can tell the difference. You go to, I guess, a regular restaurant and you get it. It's still good. But then you get that extra salt and extra lime juice in there. Sometimes I'll even use no salt, so you get a little potassium and sodium balance. Yeah, keep that balance there. But yeah, those heavy on the salt and potentially no salt, and heavy on the lime juice. That goes for the pico and the guac.
All right. And in your guac, lime juice only or lime and orange juice?
Never done the orange juice. Lime juice
Okay.
only. Sometimes if I'm feeling froggy, I'll put a little sour cream in there to change the taste, but mostly just the lime juice and pico.
You're a wild man.
Careful.
All right. If the listeners happen to want to get a hold of you, they want to talk data, they want to talk conditioning, or they want to talk about getting their department set up with the BridgeAthletic program, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. My email at BridgeAthletic is super easy. It's rob@bridgeathletic.com.
That could not be easier, but I'll put it in the show notes for them.
Yeah, that's definitely the easiest way to get to me and the easiest email to remember.
One thing that I will warn you, though, if you do end up attending Tactical Annual, you will more than likely not find Rob at the booth. He tends to wander. So just look for the real big guy with the red beard. That's Rob.
I will say I set a PR at NSCA NatCon.
I know you did. You were at that booth the only time you weren't at the booth is when I was sitting in your chair. So I was pretty proud.
Yeah, but like you said, that probably won't happen again.
No, probably not. Well, Rob, I really appreciate your time. I know the listeners appreciate your insight on both conditioning and data. And I will put all of your contact information in the show notes, including that test the ACE Talk test that you recommended. I hadn't heard of that. So I appreciate you. And listeners, AZ and Rob Hartman are officially out.